I'm going to read you a short excerpt from a Nnedi Okorafor short story called Spider the Artist. And just as a warning before I begin, this story does deal with domestic abuse. My husband used to beat me. That was how I ended up out there that evening behind our house, just past the bushes, through the tall grass in front of the pipeline. Our small house was the last in the village, practically in the forest itself, so nobody ever saw or heard him beating me. My husband was a drunk, like too many members of the Niger Delta People's Movement. It was how they all controlled their anger and feelings of helplessness. The fish, shrimps, and crayfish in the creeks were dying. Drinking the water shriveled women's wombs and eventually made men urinate blood. There's a stream where I'd been fetching water. A flow station was built nearby, and now the stream was rank and filthy with an oily film that reflected rainbows. Cassava and yam farms yielded less and less each year. The air left your skin dirty and smelled like something preparing to die. In some places, it was always daytime because of the noisy gas flares. My village was shit. On top of all this, People's Movement members were getting picked off like flies. The kill and go had grown bold. They shot People's Movement members in the streets. They ran them over, dragged them into swamps. You never saw them again. I tried to give my husband some happiness, but after 3 years, my body continued to refuse him children. It's easy to see the root of his frustration and sadness, but pain is pain, and he dealt it to me regularly. My greatest, my only true possession was my father's guitar. I wouldn't exist without my father's guitar. My older brothers weren't as interested in learning how to play, but I was. So my father taught me everything he knew. And now it was my long fingers that graced the strings. I'd always been able to hear music, and my fingers moved even faster than my father's. I was good, really good. But I married that stupid man, Andrew. So I only played behind the house, away from him. My guitar was my escape. That fateful evening, I was sitting on the ground in front of the fuel pipeline. It ran right through everyone's backyard. My village was an oil village, as was the village where I grew up. My mother lived in a similar village before she was married, as did her mother. We are pipeline people. My mother's grandmother was known for lying on the pipeline running through her village. She'd stay like that for hours, listening and wondering what magical fluids were running through the large, never ending steel tubes. This was before the zombies, of course. I laughed. If she tried to lie on the pipeline now, she'd be brutally killed. This day, he'd only slapped me hard across the face. I had no idea why. He'd simply come in, seen me in the kitchen, and smack. Maybe he'd had a bad day at work. He worked very hard at a local restaurant. Maybe one of his women had scorned him. Maybe I did something wrong. I didn't know. I didn't care. My nose was just starting to stop bleeding, and I was not seeing so many stars. I sighed and placed my hands on the guitar strings. I plucked out a tune my father used to play. I sighed and closed my eyes. I would always miss my father. The feel of the strings vibrating under my fingers was exquisite. I fell deep into the zone of my music, weaving it, then floating on a glorious sunset that lit the palm tree tops. And click, I froze. My hands still on the strings, the vibration dying. I didn't dare move. I closed my eyes. The side of my face throbbed. Click. This time the sound was closer. Click, closer, click, closer. My heart pounded and I felt nauseous with fear. Despite my risk taking, I knew this was not the way I wanted to die. Who would want to be torn limb from limb by zombies?